Good morning, everyone. I like American politics. 2020 is an election cycle year, a presidential election cycle year, not an off year, right? Who cares about the midterm elections, right? Okay, anyway, I've been paying a bit of attention, a bit more than I usually do, and Joe Biden is. This headline just made me laugh. Yahoo's reporting, this is yesterday, June 10th, today's June 11th. Biden seeks running mate who's ready to be president on day one. Like, you would expect that to be a National Enquirer headline. If you're running for president, you should probably want to be the president and want to be the president longer than just like the winning, beating Donald Trump and then being like, yeah, you take over, Hill Dog. I'm just going to go and, be Joe Biden. There's a song, and this is the song, and it's super like nice. And here, hold on, I'm going to play just a little bit.
Biden on Obama's coattails, biding his time till he derails, anticipating his next foul, one more bump on the campaign trail.
Okay, so that guy's got a nice voice, and man, like, who could make a ukulele sound like that? I don't play ukulele, I play guitar, but it's good, and it tells the zeitgeist of kind of what people are thinking. Like, is Joe Biden a serious presidential candidate, or is he the only one who maybe has a shot at beating Trump? And he doesn't have a shot at beating Trump, not unless the tactics they tried in 2016 work this time, and they didn't work then. So I don't think there's a reason for them to work this time. But saying you want a running mate who's ready to be president on day one, I think eliminates you from serious contention and serious people's sphere of thinking for the job of president, right? Like if you're saying, man, I hope the person who's vice president is good enough to be president on day one, like that doesn't instill confidence, right? Anybody thinking and looking at that says, yeah, maybe this guy's a little bit not so great. Here's a Canadian press, somebody from she's a award-winning journalist, TV, radio host, AM 640, 900, CMHL, AM 980 News. Alex Pearson, she says, I urge Greta to give us a break. Global News is reporting. Greta Thunberg urges Canada, Norway to step up on climate change ahead of UN vote. Yeah, okay. Cracks are showing, right? It used to be that Greta could do no wrong. So Saint Greta is no longer can do no wrong. Okay, hyper-local. Guelph is issuing a must-wear masks at public businesses. Now, this is issued, this is Mayor Cam Guthrie. He tweeted this out yesterday, again, June 10th. He says, hey, Guelph Medical Officer of Health has issued an order for mandatory mask wearing now in effect for phase 2 reopening in commercial retail establishments. For all details, read this. We've been in a pandemic for months, 4 months. I've been to Walmart, I've been to Shoppers Drug Mart, I've been to a whole bunch of places, and none of their staff are wearing masks. I've seen news reports of people who were wearing masks for an extended period for a public customer service job, and they passed out because they were inhaling their own oxygen, and that's not healthy. So I think this is ill-advised. I don't think this is the right move, but this is what's happening, right? They're requiring masks. How are they doing this? They're using Section 22 of, here it is, the public health. Dr. Nicola Mercer issues order under Section 22 of the Health Protection and Promotion Act for Phase 2 of the Ontario Framework for Reopening. Okay, under Section 22, I did the research, they can choose a class of people and say this applies to this class of people. And what they did is they said the class of people are business owners or business operators, and what the business owners or operators have to do is make sure that customers or employees are wearing a mask at all times while in their establishment. There are exceptions, children under 2 years old, anybody who feels that a mask impedes their ability to breathe, anybody with a medical condition. But the middle one's interesting because masks do impede your ability to breathe. It is known, that's a known fact. So if you don't want to wear a mask and are in Guelph, you can just bring the order and say, this applies to me and you can't fine me. But I wanted to make another point. If somebody says to you, well, they can't question you about your medical, like if you say, I have a medical condition that doesn't allow me to wear a mask, they can't say, what is it? Asthma, right? But you're not obliged to tell anybody. You can just say, I have a medical condition. You can't refuse service from me due to my medical condition. Like that's established in Canada as well. So this is interesting. But the final point I want to make about it is if you refuse to do that, if you refuse to wear a mask and they let you into the business or they don't let you into the business or whatever, you wouldn't be the one fined. It would be the business being fined. It would be the business. And they're charging fines of up to $5,000. Like, it's not a small fine. People are not happy about this. at all either. So this is interesting. There are some people who are very happy. They say, why hasn't this happened before? But I saw some analogies. One person said requiring masks in the third month of a pandemic is like requiring the father to wear a condom to the baby shower, right? It's a little bit late. It's a little bit ill-advised. It's a little bit stupid, right? And I don't know that this is going to, in fact, I'm sure that it's probably not going to be helpful. And I think that probably it's going to be repealed, but I have no idea. But this is the kind of stuff they're playing with. They're using orders like this to impel businesses to require masks. I don't think it's appropriate. This is the order. So to all persons who own or operate a commercial establishment in the jurisdiction of the Wellington Dufferin Guelph Health Unit, and then at the bottom here it says, failure to comply with this order is an offense for which you may be liable on conviction to a fine of not more than $5,000 for every day or part of each day on which the offense occurs or continues, right? And I'll show you, hold on. And here's the order. A person shall be exempt from wearing a face covering on the premises if the person is a child under the age of 2. Wearing a face covering would inhibit the person's ability to breathe in any way. Masks do. And C, for any other medical reason, the person cannot safely wear a face covering. So there are exemptions. It is very clear in this order. And if you want to utilize one of these exemptions, I'd probably, if I were trying to utilize one of these exemptions, I would make sure that I had this order with me to show whichever security guard, this exemption applies to me. See ya. So be aware. This stuff is happening. Right? How do you think Iran went from not requiring head coverings to requiring head coverings with a 30-year jail sentence if they don't comply? There is a pathway. Here we are. Okay? You see? Moving on. CTV News. CTV News is advocating for the removal of statues. It's really weird. CTV News. Their time has come. Calls increase for removal of statues linked to colonial legacy. Here it is. Here's the article. Their time has come. Calls increase for removal of statues linked to colonial legacy. As statues and monuments of leaders from bygone eras are being toppled in response to growing calls to end systemic racism and discrimination, the sentiment is also growing here in Canada. This is. Give me an example of systemic racism in Canada, please. I would love to have a talking point to discuss with regards to systemic racism. But as it's used right now, it seems like a conversation ender. You know what I mean? Like, you have to agree. We all agree there's systemic racism, and if you don't agree, then you're not part of this conversation. You're not mature enough, or whatever. And it's frustrating because this is how you change the Overton window. Because if you don't engage with the conversation, then and people then get uncomfortable about it and they police themselves. It's happening in real time. Like, it really, really is. Look at the 2019 election cycle. Any discussion of reducing immigration numbers is verboten. You're not allowed to talk about it, and if you talk about it, you're racist. I was on a call last night with Maxime Bernier with True North. It was a good speech. It was a good interview, worth the time. And they were talking about how True North did a poll, an official scientific poll, and I didn't ask Candace like what the method was, so I don't know, but I don't know what the method was, and I don't know how big the polling group was, and I don't know if they did countrywide or regional or whatever. So I don't know the particulars of the poll, but 76% want a complete stop on immigration until things are sorted out. And nothing is ever sorted out. Don't fool yourself. Nothing is ever sorted out. You're always in the state of, 1 foot in chaos, 1 foot in order, to quote Jordan Peterson. But people do not want this increased and rapid increase in immigration, especially with the backdrop of the pandemic, the mass unemployment, all of the stuff that we're currently facing. People are sick of it, according to that poll, according to Candace. So check that out. I don't have a link right now, but I say I'll put one in the link. Go to True North. Go to True North's Twitter feed. You'll find the link. Okay. I'm moving down on this one, scrolling down. Canada is not immune to this either. The statue thing again. Change.org petition is calling for the removal of Sir John A. Macdonald's statue in Montreal. Has received more than 10,000 signatures as of Wednesday evening. David MacDonald, the political science professor at the University of Guelph, told CTV News Channel that he believes these statues should be taken down. I just want to make a point here. During the campaign, the university, political science, would not have me come in and speak to their students, but they had every other federal candidate, including the communist candidate. But I was not allowed to go and speak to the political science department. So that just tells you kind of where this is coming from, like what Marxist organization we're dealing with. Okay, right? Like the People's Party of Canada is not allowed, but the Communist Party is. Okay. Good job, everyone. Back to this. MacDonald certainly was the architect. This is David MacDonald talking about John A. MacDonald. Certainly was the architect of genocides in Canada. Therefore, I think it's time that we continue to address his legacies, and there shouldn't be bridges and schools and all sorts of things named after someone who so blatantly went out to destroy Indigenous nations in this country, he said. Interesting, right? Like, he's saying that there's, that John A. MacDonald was the mastermind behind Indigenous genocide. And, well, here's the Britannica, Sir John A. MacDonald. And here's a quick history of Sir John A. MacDonald, because CTV? Is it CTV? They seem to forget to include this Canadian history. So I'll just a quick brush up, okay? John A. MacDonald immigrated from Scotland to Kingston in what is now Ontario in Canada in 1820. That's 200 years ago. We're judging John A. MacDonald by today's standard, 200 years. Okay. After the British Parliament united Upper and Lower Canada as Canada West and Canada East, now in Quebec, Canada West is Ontario, and the Act of Union in the Act of Union in 1840, MacDonald was elected to the Assembly of the Province of Canada as Conservative for Kingston in 1844. Growing sympathy for reform led him to bring about a coalition government in 1854 with Sir George Etienne Cartier, leader of Canada East, out of which developed the Liberal Conservative Party. I think that's funny. Libcons, forerunner of the Conservative Party, with MacDonald as its leader. He became Prime Minister of the Province of Canada in 1857. Okay, so like this is a long timeline, right? Like this is from 1848, 10 years, man. That's a long timeline. And I mean, after immigrating here in the 1820s to be in a position of leadership in the 1850s, right? Interesting. In June 1857. In June 1864, MacDonald and Cartier joined with their chief opponent, George Brown, in order to further the scheme of Confederation of British North America. After conferences in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island, and Quebec, and in London, the British North American Act was passed in 1867, creating the Dominion of Canada, and MacDonald became his first leader. Under MacDonald's leadership, the Dominion quickly expanded to include the provinces of Manitoba, British Columbia, Prince Edward Island. The Pacific Scandal in 1873, in which the government was accused of taking bribes in regards to the Pacific Railway contract, forced MacDonald to resign, but he returned as Prime Minister 5 years later and served until his death. And okay, so you can look at the history of a country one way and then look at it a completely different way and flip it on its head, especially 200 years later. But is it the correct way to go? Is the warning of 1984 is the correct way to go to erase our history so that we don't remember it, so that we are forced to repeat it? Or should we keep our statues? Should we keep our history and say that's where we were and look how far we've come? What is with the obsession of saying that person did all of these terrible things? No person is perfect. No person, especially somebody leading nations. And it doesn't matter if it's in 2020 or 1820. Leading a nation is hard. Having a population depend on you, regardless of if it's representing you correctly with trade, whether it's administering healthcare, modern, right? Or the trade would be, and the trade was an issue with Sir John A. MacDonald between protectionism and free trade. But regardless, there are issues that are hard to deal with, and you have to make a choice. And sometimes people fall on the wrong side of that choice, but the choice needed to be made. If it wasn't John A. MacDonald doing it, it was going to be somebody else. You can't get through life, especially doing something. I mean, you have, what's the famous quote? You have enemies good, that means you stood for something, right? Like you said something, you believed in something enough to articulate it. When you lead nations, you are going to affect people's lives in a way that is going to necessarily impact them. And when you make a choice, yes, there are going to be people who don't like it and who are affected negatively because of it. When Justin Trudeau did not do anything to move Indigenous villages out of flooded areas and instead just propped up and fixed the villages that were built in flood zones, and then they flooded again, that was a choice he made that had a consequence, right? Like, and you can make a case that he did that on purpose and he was a horrible person and blah, 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 blah. But sometimes the choice that you make, it's not obvious when somebody is going to negatively have a negative impact from that. And I'm not trying to make a case for John A. MacDonald. I don't know the particulars of his 200-year-old crimes. I'm not going to pretend that I do. But And because there are potentially so many. Again, when you're building nations, how can you be judged by 2020 standards when all of our issues currently are not what the issues were when they were facing? And again, you have to make a choice. The public is demanding it. You're moving forward in time. It's not like they could sit there and be like, you know what, in 200 years, people might find this offensive. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. It's crazy. And it's even crazier of CTV News to buy into this bullshit. Excuse my language. But seriously, like, the news of the day is not meant to create so much division and absolute, animosity among the population. If you want to give a history lesson, give a history lesson. If you want to reimagine history as a Marxist takeover and a racist takeover of Canada, like, that's not how it worked. It's not like Indigenous people had Canada in a functioning government from sea to shining sea, right? Like, it's not like there was a one flag and one united peoples that the settlers were coming here were displacing. Were there situations where that happened? Probably. Were there wars? Yeah, for sure. Was everybody happy in kumbaya? No. But these things were judged differently then. And we're here now. It is only used to divide. Looking at it this way is only used to divide, because they're not even asking to get better. They're just asking to erase our history. They're not saying, if we erase our history, this will be the outcome. They're just saying, get rid of it because he's a racist. It's nuts. It's nuts. It's nuts. Here's something that's modern that we could actually do something about, but I don't think anybody's going to do anything about it. Foreign Affairs Minister, has 2 mortgages with state-run Bank of China. He was working in the United Kingdom, and he had a foreign visa, but wasn't a UK resident, so he couldn't get a mortgage. So he's got a $1.7 million mortgage and a $1.2 million mortgage. 1.7, 1.2. The 1.7 was the value, and the balance is 1.2. I don't know why we know the balance. Like, is the Bank of China just giving this? Yes, he goes 1.2. Thanks, bye. Like, that's a weird thing to know. Anyway, so. Is it legitimate? It's probably a conflict of interest, and he probably should have realized that as he was made Foreign Affairs Minister. But these Liberals don't do anything. How long did it take Mr. Tabarra to come forward with the fact that he was charged with a whole bunch of indictable offenses? A couple of months? Oh, whatever. No problem. I'm just going to sit as an independent. We'll see you in the next election. Okay, here is an explainer, because the news is trying to, oh my goodness, I'm going to be long. I'm already long. Okay, well, still, here we go. The news is trying to say that politicians urged to collaborate on pandemic benefit for disabled Canadians. The Conservatives are using this to, so no opposition parties will approve the spending that was supposed to be approved by unanimous consent yesterday in the House of Commons. The Conservatives won't do it because they want Parliament to resume, and they want to be debating bills in the legislature as is required by regular Parliament rules. The NDP won't, because they don't think that the CERB or CURB, whatever it is, I don't care, deserves to have fraud checks or jail time or fines for anybody who's fraudulently used it, so they won't support the Liberals in this. And the Bloc is being the Bloc. I don't know what they want. I don't know what they're doing. They're just off in the corner until Justin gives them something, I guess. I'm not sure. But they're not supporting them right now, so whatever. So this is rocky, and people are not happy. The news is calling for the politicians to just do it. Here it is. Federal politicians are being urged to work together to help Canadians with disabilities. So they're using Canadians with disabilities as, so you could say the NDP and the Conservatives are using this money as a lever to get the Liberals to do what they want. But I was having a conversation with somebody on Twitter this morning, an argument, conversation, whatever, and he was saying, how dare you use these people as pawns? And I was like, well, the NDP are using them and the Conservatives are using them, and I support the opposition holding the government to account. So, hey, whatever you've got to do. If it was so important, why is it June 11th and they're just introducing it now? June 10th and they're just introducing it now. If it was important, it would have been in the first round, right? When they were giving hundreds of millions of dollars to the WHO each round, right? Now they've got $600 for disabled Canadians, and that's super important? Come on, get real. Anyway, back to this. So the news is not being genuine. Back to this. This after opposition parties refused Wednesday to give the unanimous consent needed to swiftly pass the government's latest emergency aid bill. The bill included provisions to deliver on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's promise of a one-time tax-free benefit of up to $600 for disabled Canadians. Jules Smith, chair of the Council of Canadians with Disabilities, says she's disappointed the governments have failed to provide emergency help for disabled Canadians. We urge all parties to work together during this crisis, Smith said in an email. People with disabilities continue to experience barriers that are not being recognized. So the paper is being used to get public pressure in order for the people to call their representatives and say, why don't you support this? We have to get the money to people. Blah, blah, blah. I don't think it's going to work. Here is Yaslav Baran, and he is, I don't know who he is, hold on, Strategic Communications and Crisis Advisor, parliamentologist, media trainer, writer, educator, and so he's got some credentials there, but he's not a blue check mark. But he says, here's a brief explainer on what's going down in the Canadian House of Commons today because the special order passed by the Liberals and NDP, the House of Commons is formally shut down. Anything that is happening currently is happening in committee, even if it's in chamber, which is what I was saying the other day. Under the current special order, when the House does reopen for one day on June 17th, all it's permitted to do is hold modified question period, hear speeches on the general subject of COVID-19, and then vote on government spending estimates. It isn't permitted to debate legislation. During the shutdown period covered by the special order up to September 21st, there's a provision for the government to introduce legislation, but the special order says the government needs the consent of all four House leaders to do that. The special order does allow the Speaker to reopen the House as the House if he feels there is an urgent matter that needs attending. For example, if the government tells them it has urgent legislation. That's how the House is opening up today. The prerogative does not, however, override the requirement that all recognized parties have to approve any legislation before it's come forward for debate. A likely scenario, therefore, is that today at 2:30 the House will open. Minister Rodriguez will say he has legislation to pass, and the Speaker will ask if it complies with the special conditions. All parties got the final draft last weekend, all agree, etc. Answer is no. The Speaker would then allow him to table the bill, but that's it. He would then immediately adjourn the House, no legislation debated. There is, however, a loophole. Should the scenario play out, the Speaker would then be able to use the normal mechanism, Standing Order 28.3 for all the geeks out there, that allows him to open up the House when it is adjourned. This SO wasn't overridden by the special order. They can, therefore, open up the House normally outside the provisions of this special order as early as about Friday. If the House opens up normally, the normal rules apply. That means no reduced quorum, no special physical distancing rules, such as being able to speak from any desk, no requirement that all parties greenlight a new bill. If this happens, the government need only one dance partner to pass the new bill. I have no idea if this is what the government has planned, but this is an avenue open to it under current circumstances. Then it can get its way with the Bloc Québécois support again. And its biggest battle becomes just one of PR, actually needing the House to force it shut, using a sledgehammer to get its way instead of negotiating like a good woke minority government, and leaning on the decidedly off-brand BQ repeatedly to pass its bills. As it stands, the NDP is asking for removal of punitive measures in the bill. Bloc wants a fiscal update, First Minister's meeting, and for political parties to pay back wage subsidy. Conservatives are asking for a functioning parliament to be reestablished. So that's the backdrop to the newspaper trying to use the bully pulpit to get people to pressure the politicians to support the Liberals. Right? Crazy. 5D chess. Back to this. Here's Andrew Scheer, the Conservative Party leader. He says if the Liberals were serious about debating legislation, they would have supported our motion to recall Parliament today. Parliament should be sitting, but Justin Trudeau shamefully shut it down. Oversight and accountability are fundamental parts of our democracy. The Trudeau Liberals need to properly fund the Auditor General, fix the gaps in their programs, and let the MPs do the job in the House. Conservatives will keep fighting for Canadians. Okay, so Trudeau this was sent at 3 p.m. So presumably they're not reopening the House, and we're carrying on as normal, I guess. Here's something to note. Jody Butts she's the elected chair of the Walrus Magazine Board of Directors tonight. And I don't exactly know what the Walrus Magazine is, but still, context from the country's best storytellers for the conversations most important to Canadians. So they're a digital publication. Obama did this too. He had lots of people in his leadership ring also have wives or spouses in the media. Catherine McKenna's husband is a columnist at Maclean's. There's a few other examples I can think of. And this is interesting to know. Gerald Butts is one of the principal advisors to Justin Trudeau. He's been fired and returned. He's had hundreds of thousands of dollars in moving expenses given to him, right? It's incredible. And they're just playing the same, it's the same game, and they keep doing it, and it keeps working. Like, it keeps working, right? All the media has to say is, oh, don't talk about that, that's racist. And people stop. They win. Done. Like that. Okay, here's the last story for this morning. Opinion: why was the arrest of sitting MP not disclosed to media? The Globe and Mail. It's not just me that thinks that it's weird, right? Like, if you have a parliamentarian, an MP, who breaks the law while they're sitting in office, while they're chairing human, all sorts of committees and stuff, human rights committees and whatever, the public has a right to know. Like, they have a right to know, especially if they're indictable offenses like assault and, watching houses and stalking and stuff. It's really concerning. So it's not just me that thinks that this is quite odd. And the idea that the PMO didn't know about this until Friday, I don't think anybody believes it. I mean, like, that makes the PMO either incompetent or not in control of their caucus. And I don't think either of those things are true. I think they know exactly what they're doing. They're moving forward on their plans, and so I don't believe they're incompetent. I just don't agree with what their plans are. So, there we are, and so, but here we are as the public in the dark because the police kept it quiet, and Tabarra kept it quiet, and PMO kept it quiet until they couldn't anymore, until they couldn't keep it buried. Came to light, and he's an independent now. He should be discharged from the House of Commons, and there should be a by-election trigger. This is crazy. But that's just my opinion. 26 minutes. Okay. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. And have a wonderful, wonderful day.